what I like about these, you can just pull it right up and
It's just difficult to breathe.
Yeah, that one just looks more like, like stocking, because you can see your lip outline when you're.
it says 32,
Looks scary.
32 degree.
We're on there.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 5:30, and I will call this regular meeting of the Burnsville City Council to order. It is our tradition to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the city clerk please note that all council members are present. Councilmember Vince Workman is joining us remotely, but it would be good for you to take the roll call for all council members, please. Would the clerk take the roll?
Councilmember Gustafson.
Here.
Mayor Couts.
Here.
Councilmember Keeley.
Here.
Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
Councilmember Workman.
Here.
Thank you. So we continue to creatively and innovate our meetings so that we can serve the public and do the public's work. So tonight's meeting is being conducted in person. All of our city council members, well, we have most of our city council members are in the chambers, and we have Councilmember Workman joining us remotely. Our staff is also present, and the members of the public may attend in person if they like. Members of the public may also watch this meeting online at burnsvillemn.gov/meetings or Comcast Channel 16 or 859. If you would like to participate during the meeting remotely, you may call 651-372-8299 or join the meeting online at zoom.us/join. More information is available on our meeting webpage and in the council agenda packet. The next item on the agenda is our announcements and presentations. We only have announcements this evening. So our scheduled upcoming meetings, regular council meetings are scheduled for Tuesday, August 18th at 5:30 p.m. and Tuesday, September 8th at 5:30 p.m. We have a work session that's scheduled for Tuesday, August 10th, and that's canceled because we now have a special work session scheduled for Tuesday, August 25th at 5:30 p.m. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comment. This is the opportunity for anyone that would like to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not in application form that will be coming before us at a future date. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council? Anyone who wishes to address the council? Seeing no one, we will move on. The next item on the agenda is additions to the final agenda, and this is for emergency items only. Ms. Mascoli, are there any emergency items to come before the body?
There are not, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Council members? Okay, thank you. And we will move on. The next item is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. However, an item on the consent agenda can be removed for a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone who wishes an item on the consent agenda to be removed for a separate discussion and vote? Ms. Mascoli?
No, Madam Mayor.
Members of the council? Okay, may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please?
Move to approve.
Councilmember Gustafson makes the motion.
Second.
Councilmember Workman then is seconding the motion. If the clerk can take the roll, please.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Aye.
Mayor Couts.
Aye.
Councilmember Keeley.
Aye.
Councilmember Schultz.
Yes.
Councilmember Workman.
Aye.
Okay. The consent agenda is now adopted. And now we'll move on to the regular agenda. And the only item that we have on the regular agenda is the COVID-19 response update. Our city manager, Melanie Mescoli, is presenting. Ms. Mescoli.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Tonight we have our standing COVID-19 update and a couple items specifically that we'd like to cover with the council. Financial review, and within your packet was a draft expenditure plan that we would seek council feedback on. I'll ask Finance Director Jenny Rohde to do a review of our current financial review. Within your packet, you also have two requests, one by the YMCA of Burnsville and one by Fairview Ridges for direct CARES Act allocations. So we'll ask you to talk about that. And the final item will be Jenny Faulkner, our Community Development Director, will provide an update on our business grant program. So with that, I would ask for Jenny Rohde to, you've got a presentation this evening.
I do, yeah. Absolutely.
I think you can do it from your, because you have a, you need the,
I do need.
oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I've just got a quick, relatively brief update, but I'm going to go over a few items. The first thing on this slide, we just thought it would be a good idea to kind of revisit where we are with revenues and what we're seeing as far as lost revenues or revenues that are going to be substantially different from budget due to COVID-19. These would be part of what we're looking at right now as we're looking at budget items and looking at where we think we're going to be and where departments think they're going to be. This is not necessarily all-inclusive, but these are the major items, and there are always other minor increases or decreases. In 2020, we certainly are seeing that things are generally decreasing across most revenue streams. The first item is licenses and permits. We do have a small, about 5.5% we're predicting to be under in the permit area, but generally tracking, pretty reasonably on a 5-year average with that. Licenses is part of that too, and we do have some reductions as far as, the refunds or the reductions in the licenses for alcohol, as well as other business licenses and other sign permits and things like that. Fines and forfeits are also down quite a bit. They've been very, about half or less than half on a monthly basis since this started. So that's the estimate to be under where we had budgeted. Recreation fees as a total, about $201,000, and this is actually a little better than what we had originally estimated. We are able, softball league is, the adult softball league is running, so we were able to have a season on that. Now we don't have the 2 seasons, but that did help in that area. For EMS charges, we're predicting around $500,000. We had a very slow, the runs were down quite a bit in February and March and April, those are usually pretty busy months. They have come back, and we are seeing, these later months being more of what we would expect, but we're also seeing kind of a decline in, or a decrease in collections. So that's kind of where that's tempering that a little bit, and we'll continue to monitor that. Investment income, we're predicting around $200,000 below budget. Interest rates are at, historically low levels. Lodging tax, we've predicted about half, and that could be even lower, depending on, what we have. We are collecting some lodging tax, but it is very very minimal. And miscellaneous revenues, those would include facility rentals and contributions and donations. Those are down as well, about $41,000. So on the non-property tax revenue loss, we're looking at probably about 1.4 million for the general fund. Right now, we've got, as far as property taxes, we have collected from this county. They have made all the settlements for the first half. Those collections are looking, about what we expect, and I think we didn't see too drastic of a decline. While I think the second half will, that time will tell. I think that perhaps is where we might see more reduction, as well as anybody that's got property tax where they're looking to reduce their taxes, that might increase as well. So a total of about 2.2, we could see 2.2 million in lost revenues. So I've got a couple other projections here. Ice Center, they are currently operating. They are projecting around a net operating loss of about $178,000 for the year. And that's pretty close to, I think, when we came in May to talk about projections, that's very close to where we thought they might be with a 3-month closure. And I think that's down about $163,000 from what we had budgeted as far as where we thought they would be with a net. They had a very small net operating loss of $15,000 budgeted. Ames Center, they are currently projecting a net operating loss of $338,000.
It's like during the recession. It's about what it was during the recession.
Yep, yeah, and I mean, as far as these revenues, when we're looking at 2021, I think we're seeing they're going to kind of remain, or we're predicting that a lot of these revenues are probably going to remain pretty flat, at least for the time being. So, but this is where these two funds look towards the end of the year. As far as costs, direct costs incurred by the city through July are about $475,000. Those would include any overtime, personnel, emergency paid sick leave, PPE, cleaning and other supplies, other public outreach or public modification of the buildings to kind of accommodate the public health requirements, any equipment that has been purchased. That is really through the end of July. As far as staff time, we've looked at staff time as far as public safety and any other dedicated staff time incurred through the end of July. That's estimated to be about $5.4 million. This slide just kind of talks about the assumptions when we're looking at eligible CARES expenditures, what we've kind of projected for 2020. That includes any of those direct expenses that we talked about on the previous slide, salaries for public safety and other staff that have been dedicated to the COVID response, any additional capital items necessary for response. Those could include IT equipment, and any HVAC or other type facility improvements that we will need. Right now, we've got a couple of those projects that we're looking at, and those could be, I think the IT that we've got, that we're looking at is about $750,000 and maybe $175,000 for possible HVAC improvements.
So that's equipment and also building the infrastructure to continue the work that we've been doing with remote.
Yep, to
Okay.
continue that. And make sure the building is, modified to accommodate any requirements or safety measures.
Are we hardening all of those firewalls as well? It's all part of that IT? Okay.
Yep. The grant program for businesses, that is also obviously included. One note here, workers' compensation expenses that we will or possibly will incur will be additional eligible cost, but they may not be incurred in time to meet that November 15th timeframe. So those would be additional on top of costs So that is kind of my brief update. If there, I will stand for any questions.
Okay.
Any questions for Ms. Rhodey? Councilmember Gustafson?
On the public safety, that 5.3 million, is that above and beyond what we normally would have spent, or is that just our total cost?
That's our total cost
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
for that time period only.
And also, I want to ask you a little bit about permits, because I understand we're kind of exceeding how we budgeted for fees coming in for economic development in our city. A lot of good projects are going forward. Is that 178 is that figured into there, that $178,000 loss?
Yeah, in the reduction in permit fees.
Okay.
Yeah, anything that we expect for 2020 is included.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Workman has a question.
Councilmember Workman?
Thank you. Ms. Rhodey, can you elaborate just a little bit on the work comp expenses so I can understand that just a little bit better?
Yeah, we know that we could possibly incur some workers' comp costs as the pandemic goes along. We currently, those aren't necessarily included in what we think will be projected for the CARES eligible expenses, just because it's likely they won't be incurred before November 15th. But there are, especially in the public safety area, if there are staff that do contract COVID, they would be eligible for workers' comp. And those would be eligible costs, but we're running into the time frame because those take a while to move through and before we pay them. And right now, we have to pay all eligible costs prior to November 15th in order for those to be eligible.
So if I may, we're looking at actual claims paid or potentially claims paid and then possibly rate shifts as a result of those claims paid?
Yes, and most likely we would see those after November 15th, and the rate changes would be in our 2021 premium payments as we renew.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Ms. Rhodey? And in our background is, you see all of the other substantially dedicated staff, and you can see who all the staff members and the cost, and all of those are eligible cost in the background. Ms. Mascoli?
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, in your packet is a draft expenditure plan. We pulled that together based on the feedback we heard from the council with regards to your priorities as we respond to the pandemic, as well as what are eligible expenses. So within this document, you will see the federal guidance that outlines how these funds can be spent. It's a little bit of an unusual situation in that we received the funds first, and then we are slowly getting clarification and guidance on how those funds can be expended. So when Ms. Rhodey indicated that we had workers' compensation costs in our preliminary estimates, that was kind of earlier in the process as we refine, and we recognize that luckily we're not having our staff contracting COVID and incurring those workers' compensation costs. Those would be future costs if and when our staff are impacted by a positive COVID-19 test. So those are costs that would not necessarily be eligible under the CARES Act programming. The guidance that we have right now is that our funds need to be spent, not simply incurred, but spent by November 15th. And so we are going to be meeting with MMB at the state level to try to get some clarity and a little bit of an extension, because the federal deadline for for spending those CARES dollars has been extended 90 days. So with that, we've tried to articulate what are those direct city expenses, what are those staff expenses, to Councilmember Gustafson's point. The guidance provides that staff time that has been substantially dedicated to responding to the pandemic are eligible. So what that means is that our payroll costs, a significant portion of our payroll costs, now fall within that acceptable expenditure guidelines. So with that, we would ask for council consideration on this plan. Does it meet your kind of goals and expectations for how we would prioritize CARES? If there's any changes you'd like to see or further discussion, happy to do that. or if you'd like this to come back at a future date as well.
Council members, we're going to be coming together here in about the 25th to look at our max tax for, that we need to vote on in September. So I think we need to take a look at the budget first. And what we have here, according to staff, is meets the federal guidelines. My conversations with our city managers that I want to make sure that when we come to the single audit, that we are in compliance with everything with the federal government so that we don't have any problems when we have to do the audit. And so this is the reason why I'm saying let's wait on some of the other discussions with regard, but the budget needs to be adopted. And so they're getting more and more information from the Department of Revenue on what is federally accepted. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To address City Manager's question, as far as the priorities, the Burnsville Cares Business and Nonprofit Grant Program is the #1 priority. Number 2 is direct city expenditures, et cetera. I'm comfortable with that priority list. And the estimates that we are looking at, nothing is firmed up yet, but I'm in agreement with the priority list and the estimates that are presented so far. No qualms there.
Okay. Councilmember Gustafson?
Yeah, I'm good with it as well.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz?
That is my priority list, yes.
Councilmember Workman?
I am in agreement with my colleagues. This looks good.
Okay, very good. Okay, so Ms. Mascoli, you and staff have direction to just move forward with what has been presented, and then we'll continue on.
Indeed, Madam Mayor, we will continue to work on the 2021 budget, and as we've mentioned it in the past, this is kind of an ongoing iteration, and the numbers continue to evolve. So we will continue to do these regular updates as well as our budget work session later this month.
Okay, very good. So next, Ms. Faulkner.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Madam
good
Mayor.
evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I don't have any slides to share with you. I just have some information that is current as of noon today. So we have received 22 applications for our grant program totaling $416,000. We have 3 grants that were less than $20,000. Our marketing efforts last week were pretty intense. We mailed out 2,900 postcards to our businesses, our business list. We sent out email lists to several different groups, including some of the biggest, I'll call them landlords, but commercial property owners that have tenants, letting them know to share this information with their tenants. Social media, and our stats on our social media digital marketing combined. So we've bought some paid ads on some popular websites that you may have seen, places you go. And we've made 97,000 impressions with our grant program, and we've received 200 clicks or 200 folks that went to the website. So they not only saw the advertising digitally, but then they took the next step and clicked that they wanted to learn more. So we're off to a good start, and we'll continue to do marketing as long as the application process is open for folks. We have received several questions, of course, in the first week, so we have updated our FAQ to try to keep folks informed and to reduce the amount of phone calls that we're getting, and so folks can self-serve and know upfront what's needed. Generally, from what I've heard, things are going well. We've received a range of comments, I think, as you have too, from this application process is easy, thank you, to this is challenging, why are you asking for all of this information? So we've received the whole gamut of comments on the process. This evening, I'm looking for some direction from you on a couple of items. And the first one has to do with the number of grants per business. So we have a couple applicants, and there's probably more to come, where they own multiple kind of related businesses. And let me give you a scenario. So we may have a restaurant that owns their building, and their building may be in kind of their real estate holding company that's based in Burnsville. And the restaurant may lease space from their land holding company. That's a second business. And then their business may be a catering company that runs out of that kitchen. So they could have 3 different businesses in Burnsville at that one location. You know, my goal based on your comments is to keep this as open as possible. So other grant programs have restricted it to 1 per business. 1 separate and distinct businesses certainly have come up as a potential, but I want to check in with you and see what your thoughts are if you want it wide open, so anybody can apply. If they're a business is a business is a business, or do you want to put a restriction on it, 2 per related business, or the businesses have to be separate and distinct, which means we can look at them, and if they're kind of related, maybe the real estate holding company one in that example wouldn't apply, but the other 2 would. Something like that, but just looking for some guidance for you on kind of the number per related business. And I'll stop there before I get into my other
So question, these businesses, if I understand correctly, just using your example, are also filed separately with the IRS. So they have different EIN numbers and tax numbers, so that they would be separate. And I would say that that business would be a legitimate business, but we're not looking at all of it. It may be owned by 1 or 2 individuals, but it's a separate business.
Exactly.
And so I would suggest to the council that we look at the businesses separately and not the owner of the business, because they are filed separately as an LLC or a S Corp or something of that sort. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would agree. The example that I thought of is there's a lot of circumstances where a person might own multiple restaurants. I know we had a gentleman in town some years ago that had, I think, 3 restaurants, and it's possible that he was the sole, or maybe he and a partner were the sole owners of all 3, but they were 3 very separate establishments. And I wouldn't want to penalize the successful owner pre-COVID for having multiple locations during COVID by saying, sorry, you have 3 separate restaurants or bars or whatever, but since you own all 3, you're only allowed to have 1 loan. I mean, there's 3 businesses. The ownership doesn't seem to matter to me. There's 3 separate businesses that are suffering individually. There's 3 separate grant applications in my mind. So I would concur with the mayor. I think if they are filing their own tax return for each of those separate businesses, they have the same case to make that any other single-owned business would have to make.
They just have to meet our standards, and
Right.
it's simple. So, but it's, members of the council, your thoughts. Councilmember Gustafson.
I agree with my colleagues, but I have a clarification. Are real estate holdings part of what will do this, so the landlords of buildings can now come in and file for grants?
Ms. Faulkner.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, yes, you did not prohibit those types of
I
businesses.
wanted to be sure, because I think
Yes.
at one time it was out, and I just.
Correct. And you know, for those of us that are reviewing this and making the best open-ended judgment calls as we can, we also want to make sure that we pass audit requirements. And if we have someone who's a landlord verifying that their tenant themselves was current on rent, it certainly can raise a question it just can raise a question when the owner certifying their own business is current. How does that look, feel, smell, right? Will it pass the smell test? And that's why I bring that to you. This is a policy question. If we don't get all the applications, you could have one person getting $60,000, $80,000 in grants because they happen to have these multiple entities and another business isn't set up that way. I believe in Councilmember Keeley's example where they're separate businesses across town, those are separate locations, right? And so that's very, very clear to me. But when somebody owns the real estate that their other businesses are operated of, and that's a separate business, and they're certifying that they're up on their rent, that's kind of where the question comes up for me more than anything. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's where I need policy direction from you on what you would think is acceptable.
Okay. Councilmember Workman, and then I'll go to Councilmember Schultz.
Thank you. I agree with Jenny. That is kind of a peculiar circumstance because you've got a business operating with, or not operating with losses. which then can't pay the rent to the other entity that owns the building. But if we're substantiating this with records, which is the framework with which we've set, it makes sense. I'd be curious to know how many situations like that we've seen, or when we get, another couple weeks down the line, how many of those have come through. Other than that, I agree with what's already been said. If we've got individual listings with the Secretary of State and we're verifying through documentation that there has been a loss, I'm comfortable with what Councilmember Keeley and Gustafson have said, but I would be interested to see if that situation has happened that Jenny was just referring to, or how many times it's happened, rather.
Ms. Faulkner, you wanted to comment on that?
Well,
remark?
Madam Mayor, members of council, we have at least one person who's submitted 3 applications with a very similar, it's not a restaurant, but they do own the land that their 2 businesses are. And they are, otherwise, all the businesses are eligible. They do have the right filings and everything. It just certainly raises the question, does it meet your objectives of this program to have that type of an application?
Well, they do have to file all of the financials.
Yes.
So that's part of the reviewing documents. So,
That's correct.
yeah. Councilmember Schultz.
I would ask for businesses that, strike that, for a business owner that has multiple businesses, if we need to go to a lottery system because we have more people coming in, more submissions, we do not put them as one submission. Those are 3 submissions, and they're in the lottery as 3 submissions, not grouped together as one. So that would be my preference on
Makes
that.
it really more of
I agree.
a fair playing
Yeah.
field, right?
Well, it's a
Exactly.
different, they're different entities. They may be owned by the same person, but they're different entities. They have different tax ID and so forth. So, but it's a lottery system, so maybe only 1 or 2, one gets it and not all 3. But,
Right.
yeah. Councilmember Gustafson.
I was just it's not uncommon in the restaurant business, and actually many other businesses, that the operating entity has a holding company for their real estate holdings, and it protects them if something happens to their operation, that they don't lose their real estate and so on and so forth. And in the restaurant business also, if you run a catering company, it's not unusual to have that separate, because if that fails, you don't want it to take down the restaurant. So it's a tax thing that protects the investors and what they're doing and everything. But I do think sometimes, if you're gonna kind of pile on and just, you have some people out there that can come in for 100. Go, hey, why not?
Yeah, but we do have a lottery system,
We
and they
do.
we do have a
More
standard
times
of
my name's in that
application.
lottery, the better chance I get of getting
Yeah,
filled
our
too.
application process is simple, but they do have to meet that standard. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I think to Ms. Faulkner's point and Councilmember Gustafson's, and even my example, I think the spirit of this is really different locations, not entities all condensed into one building in one location, which is the actual business and which is just, tax motivated segregation of the business. And so for me, in my mind, it's always been really the locations, like a single owner having, a place A, B, C, D in different addresses. Maybe they're in the same strip center, they still have different addresses and they're different, different types of businesses. So I think the lottery system helps balance that, but I do see the concern and agree that it wasn't meant to be a conglomerate all located in the same building where it's highly integrated within the same establishment.
Okay.
So,
All right. So, Ms. Faulkner, is that clear then? Is that we're going to, because as long as they send us their financials and they have different EIN numbers, it's a legitimate business.
No, I think what I'm saying, Madam Mayor, is that separation is there.
Yeah.
For tax reasons, they're separate EIN, but
Yep.
we're also looking for separate locations. So separate physical addresses, and so
So you
I think we
don't
can
want-
avoid that compiling of multiple, corporations, all with the exact same address, all with the same, like all the businesses right there.
Yeah.
I think to Ms. Faulkner's point, that isn't necessarily the spirit of, but the question is, can we create a program that has a filter for that, right? I don't know.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that if you have an entity that owns the strip center, but they have a restaurant there, and within the restaurant is their catering service.
Yeah, to me, it's the catering and it's the restaurant, but it's
And
not
not the-
necessarily the building. right?
Okay, so is that clear? Then, yes, Ms. Faulkner.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I did talk to City Attorney Jamnick about this when this application came in. So we haven't deterred anyone from applying. We let them apply. We're in the process of reviewing it. And one thing we can use is add to our clarification, the FAQs, that they're separate and distinct businesses.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, you're going to have to trust me
Yes.
and Joel that we review these to make them separate and distinct, but the whole point of that is I don't want us to have to pay back any money, right?
Yes.
In an audit. That's also the goal here. And so when something kind of looks peculiar, maybe something that we're not used to seeing, it just raises the question. And so Joel had suggested if we use the language separate and distinct, and so when something does come in, it will be left up to interpretation. And we do have in our acknowledgement forms that we can reject an application for any reason. We will certainly let the applicant know why we're rejecting them, and perhaps if there's a separate round, then we can change that determination depending on the outcome. But if you're comfortable using separate and distinct businesses, it follows the business, not the owner. It has to do with how the businesses are related.
Okay, Councilmember Keely, you
I would
like
agree
separate
with
and
that. Yeah,
distinct?
that's a good way,
Yeah.
I think, describing it,
Yeah.
to try and get to what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, Councilmember Gustafson,
Did I,
separate and distinct?
yeah, separate, I'm sorry, yes. I thought I pressed the
Okay,
button.
Councilmember Schultz has a thumbs up. Councilmember Workman, separate and distinct, okay with you?
Here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll move on real quick. We also have the request before you tonight from the YMCA to add them as an eligible nonprofit business under kind of track B.
Yeah, with the other three.
Correct. And so you have that letter, and you've received the resolution to, we'd have to amend the previous resolution that we adopted to include them. But in addition to that, we also have received an inquiry about other nonprofits. And you talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about kind of the framework and the variety of nonprofits from churches, I think, came up, and other groups, and decided not to include a blanket nonprofit. We wanted to be very specific about which ones provided known and a lot of support to our community. So I'm comfortable responding to that question, but I wanted to bring it up to you in case you wanted to include more more nonprofits, and you may get more requests for them. Maybe you save them for a future round. I'm just looking for direction on the nonprofits.
Councilmember Gustafson.
I'm okay at looking at other nonprofits after we figure out what we need to do here in the city, if there's money available to help out. But I think it's paramount that we get this under control for our budgets that are coming up and figure out just what we have in that area. And as far as the why going on is just part of the three that can apply, I'm fine as that's part of the resolution. But I don't want to just throw it open until we know where we're at with money right now, because we don't.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Shall we leave it the way it is, add the Y into the other three, and then we'll, the other part is the hospital. We can wait for the hospital until after we take a look at our needs in the city, because it's now extended 90 days, correct, Ms.?
No, Madam Mayor, the nonprofits would go through the application process similar to the business grant program.
Yeah.
For the hospital, that is carved out separately in the CARES Act, and that could be a direct allocation. As far as the extension, that has not been allowed for cities to have an extension. So our Our timeline remains November 15th.
November 15th. And
Indeed.
that's when we have to release the money if we are going to be looking at the hospital's request.
As of today's guidance, that is a true statement.
Yeah. So right now, the hospital is asking for $161,000. So, and we need to make sure that we take care of the citizens of Burnsville.
I agree.
Okay?
Were you asking for
Yes.
feedback or?
Yeah, if everybody, so Councilmember Keely.
I'm perfectly okay with the YMCA request to go as the other nonprofits, and I'm perfectly fine supporting our Fairview doing it today or in the near future.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping and encouraging that all the communities that they've reached out to will do the same, because collectively, we can each put a contribution toward helping that hospital.
Yep.
You know, and I did want to ask for some clarification. The Fairview system has received significant and substantial amounts of money, but they have
That's
facilities
M-Health,
all over
the whole-
right,
yeah,
all
the
over
whole
the Twin
M-Health.
Cities. I'm really interested in what our Burnsville Fairview Ridges Hospital has received
Yeah.
and what they have incurred in costs and losses, so we can get a handle on.
Yeah.
Not that our 160,000 is going to make their day, but it's going to help. And if every community contributes something in that neighborhood, depending on their the amount of activity they get from those communities, it's definitely going to add up to a lot, and it'll make a difference for them. So.
Yeah, I did ask Ms. Muscoli to reach out to her colleagues in our South Metro area and see what their discussion is about and whether they're going to be considering M-Health Bridges' request. And I'd like to have that information. And I also want to know how much of the 128 million was allocated to M-Health Bridges.
Right, just to the ridges.
So
right.
we understand that they're supporting M-Health Bridges. I'm trying to get used to M-Health rather than
M-Health, right.
than Fairview Bridges. Yeah, Councilmember Schultz.
Yeah, before we take action on anything with the hospital, I would like to see that information just so we know
Yep.
what it is and that type of
Yep.
thing. I think that's important that we get that information, both our other communities contributing, how much of that larger portion of CARES Act money that they got, how much of that went into our Fairview.
Yeah.
And what are the economic impacts that they're facing, and perhaps if that information also got out to the other communities, they would be more likely to assist.
Yeah, I think they sent the letter that we received, Councilmember Schultz, is the same letter I think that they might have sent out to the other communities as well. But I'm not quite sure if the amount is the same that they sent to us, because each community has a different CARES Act allocation.
Right.
Yeah. So, Ms. Muscoli, and you're going to have that conversation with your colleagues.
Indeed, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Councilmember Workman would like to provide a comment.
Okay, Councilmember Workman, okay. I'm
Thank you.
trying to.
The benefit of
and
going last
the
is that
reason
you've
why I
all
want-
covered essentially what I was seeking. I'd just like to urge our neighboring communities to get involved, to assist Fairview, and ask that Melanie get in touch with her peers. Maybe we could find a way to work with our neighboring communities and create a number amongst all of us that is helpful, by working and collaborating with their programs that they've established as well.
Okay, it seems like the clerk has, there's a unanimous understanding that our city manager will reach out, and that we'll also get some information on the 127 million and how much was allocated to M-Health Bridges. Okay, Jenny.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, if I could have a motion to adopt the resolution that would include the
The
YMCA.
amended resolution.
Thank you. The amended resolution
Okay.
for eligible costs up to $50,000. That would treat them the same as the other
Okay,
nonprofits.
may I have a motion to adopt the amended resolution, putting the YMCA into the other three nonprofits? May I have a
Move to
motion?
approve?
Councilmember Keely makes the motion,
I will second.
second by Councilmember Schultz. The clerk take the roll, please.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Aye.
Mayor Coates.
Aye.
Councilmember Keely.
Aye.
Councilmember Schultz.
Yes.
Councilmember Workman.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Ms. Faulkner, is there anything else?
No, Madam Mayor, thank you very much, and I'll be back at my next opportunity if I've got more questions and make sure you're.
So I also have one question that I'd like to bring before us, and this has to do with if an individual, because we talked about it, but I wanted to be clear about it, does not live in Burnsville or does not live in the state of Minnesota 51% of the time. I think it's the business that we are interested in saving, and it doesn't matter whether that individual lives in Minnesota 51% of the time or 49% of the time. Ms. Faulkner.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the way our program is set up, it does not use the language permanent resident. It just says
good.
has to be a resident of Minnesota, so that means they have to have a house here.
Yeah.
We don't particularly care how long they stay here.
Okay.
Right? And,
Yeah.
but as long as they have a residence here of some
I was asked
form.
that question, so I wanted to make sure that they just have to have a resident in Minnesota. Councilmember Schultz.
On that particular issue, I care about where the business is located.
Yeah, in Burnsville. Has to be in Burnsville.
Right, no, but like, that's it. Like, for me, that's what I care about. Perhaps, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that is the requirement of our grant application, is that the business has to be a Burnsville business.
She's referring to the residents at all, making any residence a requirement that if they own a business here, we really don't care where they live.
That's right.
Even if they don't have a residence here in Burnsville, they could live in Scottsdale, Arizona, but own a business here and run it and visit it, and that still should be qualified.
We have quite a few businesses in this city that are in Burnsville, but the owner lives outside of Burnsville,
Yeah, and even outside of Minnesota in some cases.
but has a resident in Minnesota. Ms. Faulkner.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the challenge with having ownership living purely outside of the state is that they may be eligible for other CARES programs in their state that we may not be able to track. And then things get complicated. So it's much easier to administer and get the money out the door quickly if we know that they are in the state. We're able to verify those other CARES funding sources through the state of Minnesota, just like we could with Dakota County locally. And that's following the guidance that the deed adopted when they adopted their program in the county. That's why we honed in on that.
Because one of our hospitality facilities in Burnsville, the owner, I think, lives in Savage.
Madam Mayor, yes, and that's
So,
fine.
yeah.
It's fine to live in Savage. We have one, I think, that lives in southwestern part of the United States, but also has a home here in Minnesota, and that's fine too, so.
Yeah, and that's what I just wanted to make sure it's clear for those who are watching this evening. Okay, Councilmember Gustafson and then Councilmember Keely.
Are we done with this subject here?
I
Or no?
don't think so.
Okay, then mine's for another subject I want to bring
Okay.
up, so.
Okay,
I thought we were
Councilmember
ending.
Keely, is yours for this subject?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Keely. Then press your button again, Councilmember Gustafson.
I'm curious, Ms. Faulkner. My glasses keep fogging up.
I know,
So
that's
while
why.
I'm talking, I'm going to take it off and I'll put it back on. If I lived in Scottsdale, Arizona and owned a bar restaurant here, how would I be able to apply for CARES funding in Arizona when I don't have a business out there? I just have a business here.
Madam Mayor, members of the council.
Ms. Faulkner?
As I understand it, each governmental entity can create their own parameters for their own CARES program. So they could potentially allow a business owner that has a business located outside their jurisdiction to receive funds.
Wow.
It's not a federal requirement.
Gotcha. That would be I could see where it's a possibility. I think it's a stretch to say that a city would, I mean, look at it from our perspective. Oh, we have somebody that lives in Burnsville and they own the business in Scottsdale and they apply for our grant program to fund the business. And I mean,
No.
clearly we're not going to, I mean,
Yeah.
common sense would dictate you're not going to do that,
Yeah.
but we have no control over the common sense of other cities, is that right?
Okay, but we do have our standards in place in our policy with regard to that. Councilmember Schultz?
I understand that there might be difficulty in ascertaining if they've received CARES money from another place. Could we not have them sign an affidavit that they have not received CARES money? And then if they do, that's a fraudulent action on their behalf. We've done our due diligence.
Yeah. Ms. Faulkner?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to need some help from the city attorney here on answering this question.
Yeah. And I think our staff can take a look at that, Councilmember Schultz, and make sure that our standards, our policy addresses those issues.
We put language like that in the agreement, so.
Yeah.
Then I see no problem with allowing, as long as the business is here, even if they do not own a home in the state of Minnesota, with allowing them to apply. That's how I look at it, but I need the rest of council to say how they're viewing it.
Okay.
I agree. I don't think it's a concern. I guess we're deferring. I mean, I think there's enough vetting involved that if the business is here, I don't really care where they live. They own the business that's here. They're filing Minnesota tax returns for that business that's here and paying Minnesota taxes, et cetera. Their residents can be in Europe for all I care. I mean, the business is here.
Yeah, and we're saving the business and the jobs.
Yep.
Okay, Councilmember Gustafson, it's about this one, or that's another subject?
Well, I was just going to say, you can incorporate your business in another state and do a DBA in Minnesota. And
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
corporate taxes will go out of state. That happens a lot. They'll pay some tax here on the entity, but they can put it all together, but so yeah, there are those that can be in the Virgin Islands and put a business here
And avoid paying any
and
state,
avoid paying any taxes.
any taxes in the
Yeah,
state of Minnesota.
exactly. That's why they incorporate some of these states.
Yeah,
That'd be a stretch.
okay.
It's not a stretch, it happens all the time.
Well, I know.
So, Ms. Faulkner, are you clear with what you're hearing? With
Madam
regard
Mayor,
to-
members of the council, if you want to allow non-residents of the state, then we need to further amend the resolution, because that was a criteria in the resolution that you had adopted when you created this program. So I believe we have the flexibility to do that under the program, because it lets us decide for many things how you want your program to be. So if that's okay with you, then I would just ask that we further amend the resolution where we included the Y to also strike the requirement for a majority owned by a resident of Minnesota from our program.
Councilmember Gustafson?
Oh, did I not turn that off? I apologize.
Okay, Councilmember Schultz, still this item.
I
I will now know that you won, the next item is yours.
I motion to amend that the applicant does not need to have a residence in the state of Minnesota to apply.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second, and there is a discussion. Councilmember Workman?
Thank you. So we're saying that the individual does not need to live here.
Doesn't need to have a residence.
In the state of Minnesota, but would just need to be the primary owner of the business. If it's a partnership, well, I guess that's a moot point. Again, I'd be curious to know if we've run into this, and in a couple of weeks, if this is something that, it'd be nice to quantify if this is something that is if this exists frequently in Burnsville. I'm just not aware of this. So I apologize. That's not really a question. I just needed some clarification on that.
Okay, and you know, there's a motion already on the floor to
Right.
amend the resolution to say that this is about the business and the residence of the owner doesn't matter.
No, and it is, I suppose it is about the business. It's about the employees and all that other stuff. And I would hope that if there are other states implementing programs like this, they would have some type of check that they're not awarding money to business owners that live in Arizona for, a business domiciled in Burnsville. But again, I don't know that we have a way of checking that, so.
I think we only have control of what we do,
Right,
and we already have policies in place to address because it is about the business and they're going to be sharing their financials.
yep, okay, thank you.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to amend the resolution to include, to say that the residence of the owner doesn't necessarily have to be in the state of Minnesota. Are you okay with the amendment?
I am right now, but again, I'd like to know if this is something that we've bumped into, if we, review this at our next council meeting.
Okay, we're going to be taking a vote here. I'm going to ask the clerk to take the roll.
I'm
Okay,
ready.
are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Gustafson.
No.
Mayor Couts.
Aye.
Councilmember Keeley.
Aye.
Councilmember Schultz.
Yes.
Councilmember Workman.
Aye.
Okay. And the clerk has the division of the House. Thank you so much. All right, Councilmember Gustafson, we're moving to the next item.
Well, it's not the next item, but it
Well,
has
it's
to
the
do with all
next
this.
item within the CARES Act.
It's something that is, under the program, Jenny, you have to have been in business by the end of 2019 to qualify for this program. Am I correct in that?
Oh, yeah, thank you for bringing that forward.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, no, you had to have been in good standing with the Department of Revenue and the state as of March 1st, so.
March 1st, okay.
For COVID.
Yeah.
The reason I bring it up, I was thinking about Los Grandes over here.
Yeah.
The poor guy was open 2 weeks and got closed down, and I'm not sure at what point he was actually in business, and
Well, he was pre-COVID because I was there for lunch
Yeah,
before,
okay.
then it shut down.
okay, so if they were in good standing as of March 1st, they're good. All right, thank you. I feel much better about that.
Okay, and that's good because I've forgotten that we
Yep.
need to check on that. And I remember pre-COVID going in for lunch. So it's March 1st? Yes. Yeah, okay, good. Is there anything else, Ms. Faulkner, on the CARES Act?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, no, I have nothing else.
Ms. Mascali, is there anything else?
I don't believe so, Madam Mayor, unless there are further questions by the council.
Okay. Members of the council, are you okay with what we have done tonight with the update on COVID-19? Okay. Councilmember Schultz?
On the other nonprofits, I would like to just keep that open for evaluation. I know that our time is short, but depending on how our funds are, the number of businesses that apply and that type of thing, I would like to keep that up because we do have some really fantastic nonprofits in Burnsville that are servicing our communities in so many different ways, which also includes some of our adult day programs for developmental disabilities and that type of work. And so they're also really struggling, and at the same time that we have people with increased needs. So just not saying we take any action tonight.
No.
Just saying we keep
Yeah.
this open, and this is something I would like for further evaluation, probably at our next
Yeah.
council meeting.
Well, I think we talked about that we will evaluate after we do the budget
Yep.
and do the
Perfect.
max tax for 2021. Councilmember Keely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to point out some verbiage that I thought was a little, could be interpreted in the wrong way. And earlier, City Manager Lee sent some language that she pulled from the deed addressing this, and I think we have a fix for it. So I just wanted to note that item 6 under our eligible businesses, where it states may include businesses that have applied for, received other COVID-related federal funding, such as the Small Business Administration Economic Disaster Loan or Paycheck Protection Plan. And then it's followed by note, only federally qualified unreimbursed expenses are eligible. And my issue with this is it's using the idle loan in the example. And it's okay that a person did get an idle loan and a paycheck protection, or even an idle loan advance, which was a grant, much like the PPP is a forgivable loan. And so I think the language that City Manager Lee came up with helps clarify that where this might send a person who did qualify for an idle loan thinking, oh, well, I got that funding and that was all of my expenses for the year, so I don't have anything left unreimbursed per se. But the idle loan is treated differently because it is a loan that has to be paid back and carries an interest rate. It is not a grant as our program is, or as Deeds was, or as PPP is turning out to be. Right?
Yeah.
So thank you to the
Okay.
city manager for getting that new language.
Okay, with that, staff, Councilmember, Ms. Faulkner.
If I can, to Councilmember Keely's question, the language that we have is coming from the federal guidance.
Yeah.
And so, again, thinking of the audit, if someone's receiving federal funds for the same expense, they can only get that one time, whether it was a loan or a grant is our understanding. So we can change the language on the FAQ, but I'll use the term double dipping, is prohibited under the federal
Yeah.
regulations. And so we just want to be cautious about what we're approving with someone who has already received funds, so that we don't end up in a situation where we have to pay the money back because we didn't do our due diligence on that part, so.
That's good. I always want to make sure that we are in compliance with the federal regulations, because that single audit is very important, and I don't want it to have a direct impact on our AAA bond rating. I'm going to be very vigilant about making sure we don't get into trouble with that, because it's important to the residents and businesses of Burnsville that we continue to hold that AAA bond rating. Okay. So are you okay with the way that the language is, because it meets federal guidelines? Councilmember Keely?
Yeah, the recommendation that City Manager Lee sent me, I think, was much better in clarifying it. And I think, to Ms. Faulkner's point, it might be beneficial to really vet out that that qualifier that includes the idle loan, not the idle grant, but the idle loan, because many businesses went after PPP and an idle loan as well. So they can be combined, but one does not discount the other, and for all the same reasons. The clarity really is the idle loan doesn't actually ask for the types of specific hard expenses. It's really looking at a more higher level umbrella of, was your business negatively impacted by COVID? A governor's order to shut down, or just people stopped shopping or stopped eating, and it asks for your total year's revenue and your total year's gross profit, and then they asked for a tax return, and they basically plugged in a formula and gave you an offer for a loan which has to be paid back at a 3.75% interest rate over a period of time, either 15 or 30 years, which was a very good program. But that was very, very separate from grant-related type stuff, like the idle grant, which was up to 10,000, or even deeds grant. You said if you got the idle grant for 10, you can't come to us for 10. So it was very grant to grant tied together, but the idle loan was not really part of that qualifier. Because many businesses got both a PPP loan, which is going to be a forgivable loan, and they also got an idle loan right alongside it.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, Ms. Mascoli?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Council, we've crafted the program to be as broad as we can under federal guidelines. So we would be certain that whatever vetting is done by Ellers, that it complies with those federal guidelines regardless of the specific program parameters. That's ultimately what we want to make sure is that we're not subject to any clawback of any of the funds that have been distributed to a business. So if that's a clear expectation by the council, then we can perhaps massage the language in there to Councilmember Keeley's point, all understanding that we need to comply with those federal guidelines. That's the foundation of it.
Okay. Everybody's okay? If there's nothing else to come before the body this evening.
Oh, Madam Mayor?
Oh.
Councilmember Workman indicated he wanted one more comment, please.
This is the reason why I need the city manager next to me, because I'm trying to manage the dais and at the same time she's helping. Okay, yes, Councilmember Workman.
I won't drag this on, but I just wanted to mention how proud I am of this program. This is a very friendly program, probably the most friendly program in the state. And, we talk about boldly leading. I think at our last meeting, Greg had made a comment that has kind of resonated with me that we should be proud of this. And I just wanted to make sure that we all recognize that we're really here trying to help businesses, and this is good work we're doing.
Okay. Members of the council, if there's nothing else or any other comments on this particular item, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Move to adjourn.
Councilmember Keeley makes the motion.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Schultz. The clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Aye.
Mayor Couts.
Aye.
Councilmember Keeley.
Aye.
Councilmember Schultz.
Yes.
Councilmember Workman.
Aye.
Okay. Very good, and we stand adjourned. Thank you for joining us, and have a good night.